hid my image.
Okay, good morning. I'm so excited to be with Liz Pudik this morning. I recently met Liz at the Forgotten Florida race, which was my first trail race, and I meet this lovely spark of joy who's just a bundle of light, and she shared with me that this was her 800-mile race that she did. And I was just so taken and smitten. I immediately signed up to be on her fan club, which I might have founded because she was just such a wonderful human being to be in the presence of. So thank you, Liz, for taking the time to chat with me this morning and to share a little bit about your story and your journey.
Yes, thanks for having me. You are a bundle of joy too. Like, I feel like you just called to me as I was walking away. I was like, oh, she looks like a friend.
I felt the same way. Okay, I can't wait to ask you these questions because, as a member of your fan club, it's it's important to
Oh,
have document it for the website. Um, okay, so you sent me this really awesome race resume, and you sound like you just popped out as a superhuman and that you've been like that your whole life. But I know that that's not actually the reality. You mentioned that your ultra races started in 2018. So what was it? And also you served Army for 3 years. Thank you
yep,
for your service.
of course.
And so that would have been a very active time. What was, were you just a natural athlete growing up? Were you involved in a lot of sports? What's the scoop?
Well, I'm not horribly coordinated, so running has always been a good outlet for me. I grew up in ice skates. My mom pushed me into ice skating when I was very little. So I kind of had that as a small child. But again, the lack of coordination led to some complications and falling a lot. So I left ice skating and just started running. And it's always been somewhat of an outlet. I ran a little cross country in high school. Um, I just always enjoyed running. So it's something that I like to do. And I've always done for pleasure more than anything else. But yeah, obviously the Army required some level of athletic ability. Thankfully, not too much coordination though.
Awesome. I also learned to ice skate when I was really little. I lived in New York, and later on, I would find out that the reason that I was the first one that was like went onto the ice is because I was this littlest. And if somebody was going to fall through, they wanted it to be the one that they could get out the easiest.
That's terrifying.
Things you're glad you don't know at the time.
Yeah.
But I loved ice skating too. So that's really cool. Okay, and then so you did cross country in high school, and then there's this stretch of time between when you started doing your trail races. And I have to say, having recently done my first trail race, like, oh my God, I had no idea I had so many muscles in my feet. Like, I didn't know I needed to do core work for my like toes and arches. So what was your activity level? What were you doing in between that time? And did you do anything special to shift to trail running, or were you running on trails all that time?
Nope. I never ran a trail until I was 38. So I was always just a road runner. I ran outside simply to stay cardiovascularly fit. I had never run more than, well, I ran a marathon when I was 28. And then I swore I was never going to run that far again. I was like, nope, that hurt. I'm done. And, it's funny because, you forget. It's like childbirth. You forget that hurt and then you do it again. But, but yeah, so I ran that race, and then mostly just I taught some body step. The Les Mills program at my local gym, so I was always active, just never to an extreme like with ultra running. But yeah, no, I'd never run a trail. And then my friend Mike Kelsey, who's the race director for a race called Potawatomi, which actually just happened this past weekend, and very exciting. The 200 miler records were set, both male and female, new course records. Very, very exciting. A 50-mile course record was set too.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, and he's the race director for that. And he and I used to work professionally together. And he was like, I know you like to run, Liz. Why don't you come try my race? And I'm like, it's in the woods. Like there's mud. I don't know. I like to run roads. And he said, well, just come. There's a 10-mile option. You don't have to do any of the crazy distance. Just try it. And I was like, oh, okay, because he's so persuasive. And so I showed up in like road shoes. I didn't know you needed trail shoes. I showed up in road shoes. I didn't have a headlamp. I didn't know what I was doing. He handed me a headlamp and said, go. And so I went, and it was a 10-mile loop. The course has, I think, about 1,600 feet of elevation gain and loss in a 10-mile loop. So it's not a flat course. It was hilly, a lot of mud, a lot of rocks, a lot of roots. So it was definitely full trail experience. And I won. And I was like, hey, I kind of like this. I'm good at it. Maybe I should keep doing it.
Wow.
Yeah. Not to say that like I'm a very middle of the pack runner a lot of the time, but it happened to be a smaller race, and it was a great first experience. That's for
What a great first experience. No kidding. And where is this?
Potawatomi is in central Illinois. So technically Pekin, Illinois, which is approximately 3 hours south and a little bit west of Chicago.
Okay, cool. All right. So for us Flatlander Floridians over here, we have an understanding of like, and what was the temperature? Do you remember what the temperature was?
Well, so April is very tricky in Illinois. Like this past weekend, they had lows of 28 and then like highs in the mid 60s. They went from sun to like practically snow like during this race. Like it was crazy, and you never know what you're going to get. So Illinois in April is you never know. It could be freezing and snowing, or it could be 70 and beautiful.
And do you remember back in 2018 what it was like that day?
Well, it was dark and it was cold. I know because I had to wait for my friend who I went with, and I had to wait at the finish line, and I was freezing to death. So I don't know how cold. Probably in the 30s or 40s.
Okay. And
Yeah.
it was not, you didn't have to run through any puddles?
Oh, I did. There's 2 water crossings.
Aha.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So you had
It was,
cold, you had wet, and you had dark.
yeah. Well, and like, the stabilizer muscles that we were talking about before, when you're a road runner, I don't think you build those up as much as when you get out and regularly hit the trail. So my muscles were not prepared for, and I did at that time, I did some CrossFit. I'm trying to think what else I was doing at the time. I was running a little bit. I was doing some CrossFit, the occasional yoga. Like it was just my usual mix, but my stabilizer muscles were not ready for that craziness.
Well, that makes me feel a little bit better about my first one.
No, and it takes years. I feel like even now, like with different terrain, like when I go do like a mountain race, those stabilizer muscles are used differently than they might be here. And it's always a new pain, but good training.
So that was 2018. 2019 was your first ultra, the Howl at the Moon. How long was that?
It was an 8-hour timed ultra, which timed ultras are awesome because you can kind of do whatever you want. So if you're not sure if you're going to like running really far, or if you just want to take it slow, I mean, it was a looped course. I think Howl is flat. It's pretty flat. There's like one little hill in there, and the terrain's not too technical. So not too many roots or rocks to, make you fall on your face or anything like that. Unlike Potawatomi, it's very technical, but yeah, it's just a loop, and you just run it until you can't or don't want to anymore. And so I did that for 8 hours, and I tied for first. So I don't know. Ultrasign passed me as second. I don't know how I got that designation, but it's okay. And I was like, hey, this is kind of fun. I like doing this. I'm doing all right. In a smaller market, I'm competing pretty well with the other women. So it was an encouraging race. And for our first race, it was a great first race. Such a great atmosphere, positive people, so many encouraging fans of family members who are like me, who want to do crazy things and push myself to my limit and see what that limit is.
And you got that cheering, you got that like support as you would run along.
Yeah, not the whole 3.5 miles or whatever, but like at the start, where you come around, people like camp the night before. Ultra races are just known for their supportive community, and some races, like having done road races in the past, they're really competitive and intense. But I think trail races in general are just much more laid back, and everybody wants to see everybody succeed. And it was just a great experience.
And that's one of my favorite things about the vibe of ultras is it's like totally different. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like for people who've never gone to a trail race or never done anything like that, like it is a totally different. So I've done 3 Ironmans and completely different vibe, totally different vibe. So what's the vibe of an ultra like?
Well, um, it's it's fun. It's like almost like a party, and it kind of depends on where, because they're all a little different. Like I've raced on the East Coast, I've raced on the West Coast, I've raced in the Midwest. I would say the underlying vibe is always that of support and encouragement. So like just kind of like a base of support. Everybody wants to see everybody succeed. I don't see the same. I see competitiveness. I mean, but more often, as opposed to competing with each other, you want everybody to succeed, and you're competing with yourself or maybe a course record. It's not always, I mean, there are first, second, third places, but I don't feel like that's something that people are always going for. It's just to cross the finish line and have a good time doing it. So for example, Aravaipa Racing out west, I've done a few of their races now, and they have, you know, loudspeakers of music and just you know, a lot of hype, I guess, leading up to the race. And it's really, it's a very party atmosphere, a lot of really neat people. And then like leading up to Florida, like I met you and everybody's just there and we're excited to be there. So I would say it's just a really positive, happy vibe, and one of support and community.
Do you have any, I know I'm totally putting you on the spot about this because I didn't mention this question before we talked, but do you have any idea about why that is? Like why it's different in like a marathon where these people are going, 26 miles versus an ultra race where the distances can be even longer or shorter? Like why is the vibe so different, do you think?
I think that's multifaceted. I think one reason is that ultra racing and trail racing, it calls to like different people. You know, I see a lot of the people I know who run triathlons are extremely professionally accomplished. They are organized. They have very specific training plans that they are very regimented. Where not to say that trail runners aren't like that. I know plenty of trail runners who are fit all of those things, but I find there's also this I don't want to say disorganization, but like just kind of a more like I love to run and I'm happy to be there and I want to do this. It calls to me in, just from inside. I as opposed to I don't know the calling seems a little different.
Mm.
So I think that's one of the things. And you know, I meet a lot of people who come from uh, and I don't know a ton of Ironman, so I don't know if this is true for Ironman too, but on the trail, we share stories. We run together for like at a looped course, you might run with the same person for a loop or 2 loops and then split off at an aid station. You meet so many people, and I hear a lot of stories of hardship when I'm on the trail, like things that people accomplished, and this ultra running or this 100 miler or whatever is like their next goal, because it is something that's kind of unfathomable to a lot of people. They're like, you ran 100 miles. I am a 44-year-old mother of 3. I have a very average looking physique, which I know you can't see in the Zoom, but I'm not super muscly or like I don't look like I could do that according to most people. So so I think it's just a really one of the things that differentiates is like we just want to see what we can do. There's like this desire to push to the next limit, and coming from some hardship or some difficult challenge that was overcome in the past, like this is like the next level. I don't know if that answers your question real
I
well.
love it.
I feel like there are other things too. I think also just like wanting to push yourself to the limit with that community is another thing, because I don't know if there's the same kind of community with Ironman. I guess you would have to tell me, having not done one of those.
Well, I would say I got into triathlon because that's where the cool, smart, fit people were. Um,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, I want to hang out with those people. So apparently I'm going to do that now. So, and they do, you're totally right about the vibe. Like they do tend to be very together. Ironman, any kind of triathlon is like so many logistics. And I'm going to ask you some of the logistics about the ultras because there's a lot that goes into that. But like on an Ironman race day, especially if it's not your 10th Ironman, there's just so many things to keep track of, like your transition setup and your, what you're going to wear when and doing this at exactly the right time, that like there's a lot of in your head, like, I got to keep it together to be in the right, I got to get myself organized so that I poop at exactly the right time so that I'm at the place, and that, it's like, you're right. Everything has to be so structured that, like, I really love hearing your description of it's because I love it.
Well, on the trail, you can poop anytime.
That's great. That works for me.
Maybe not always the best time. At Georgia, there's just no foliage anywhere.
Oh
And I'm
gosh,
like, where am I going to go to the bathroom?
that just is what it is, right?
It is.
Yep. Okay. So I want to hear, would you please tell us about, you did your, in 2020, you ran a self-supported 50 miler back on that same, how do I say,
Potawatomi.
Potawatomi, back on that same 10-mile looped course. Is that right?
Yep, my friend Krista and I decided we were going to do that 50, and then we were like, "Oh man, it got canceled because of COVID. We got to go do it anyway." Because when you've been training for so long, like you can't just not go.
Oh, that's
So
awesome. So that was a you and your girlfriend did it.
yeah, two girlfriends, Krista and Amanda, and myself.
Oh, how cool. Okay.
Yeah,
So I was going to ask you about spectators, because I did my first Ironman in 2020, and it was the year that spectators were like not banned, but strongly discouraged. So, you didn't have any.
we had no spectators. I think Krista's husband showed up for her at the end,
Aw,
and that was it. I had a little cooler with some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and hydration beverages in my car, and it's a 10-mile loop that we just did 5 times. So that was it. I
that's
think
it.
it's funny that you mentioned spectators, because I know a guy who was saying how it's so underwhelming sometimes when you cross the finish line, because you never know when you're going to cross the finish line. Like I crossed the finish line at Tunnel Hill in Southern Illinois. I crossed the finish line just before sunrise, and there wasn't really anybody there. It was like a really cold morning. I could see a bonfire in the distance. There was not the race director, but I think some other people who just handed me a medal. It was still in the plastic. Oh, it's not metal, it's a buckle. And it was a really sweet buckle too, because it was a sub 24 buckle. So it was like the extra special one. And I'm just looking around like, okay, I guess this is it. And that was my first 100 experience. But I think most of us are running for ourselves. We're running to push ourselves and see what it's not like for some glorious ending. So the friend of mine who was like, hey, we need to find a way to make it more exciting when people end. I'm like, I don't really think you do, because I think most of us are just doing it to see what we can do. And while having a crowd is nice, it doesn't matter. It's still a relief. It's still an accomplishment. It's still the most amazing feeling to finish.
It's bringing to mind, Tony Robbins talks about like these 6 human needs or motivating factors, and one of them is significance.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to say that, like, Ironman has that nailed.
Yeah.
Because it's all, like, the race fees are very expensive, and then you get to be an Ironman, and it's like very, very significance oriented. So when we're talking about the vibe between the full distance triathlon community, the Ironman community, and the ultra community, like, I think people who do ultras have transcended that need for significance, because if you're lucky, you get a belt buckle.
Yeah. And if you're not lucky, then you get to go back and think about how you messed up. No,
Yeah.
not really. Or you know what you can do better for next time. My very first like full 100-mile attempt, I DNF'd at 50. And every single race, 100 or otherwise, there's like something I learn. Or I mean, even at in Africa, which I was like well prepared for. I'd done several hundreds beforehand. I thought I knew what I knew. And then I'm like climbing up a rock, and I prefer a waist lamp to a headlamp. It's always, I think, optimal to have both. But my headlamp was in my pack, and my waist lamp was on, and I'm climbing up a rock like I can't see a thing because my light is on my waist. So, you know, you learn. I learned something at every race.
Was that a free climb, or were there any, like, were you roped into anything?
Nope.
Nope.
Not. There were thoughts that crossed my head about leaving my children motherless, but thankfully I'm still here. here to tell.
Well, that leads me into a question that I really want to ask. So I'm going to jump to, so you have three children. How old are they?
9, 11, and 12.
9, 11, and 12. And how in the world do you juggle kiddos and training schedule and adulting and a job?
It's definitely challenging, and it's fluid, because when I first started ultra running, I was married, and so they were little. I mean, they're still too little for me to just leave at home, but when I was still married, I could get up at 2 or 3 in the morning and go, run on the trail 20 miles or whatever, and then come home and do my mom thing. But now I can't do that as much. I would say my training has probably greatly suffered because of being divorced. And so now we share the kids 50-50. The weeks I have them, I mean, I'm lucky if I just kind of get some road running in around my house. They're also really busy. All three of my kids are in competitive sports, so I'm always running every which way every weekend. So, as my kids age, and I just have less time to do it. So I have to just squeeze it in where I can. But I think the most important thing I've learned, especially in the last 3 years with all the transitions of my home life, is just that I'm having grace with myself. I'm not able to be regimented. So I just get it where I can, and I work as hard as I can when I can and call it good and try not to beat myself up about it.
I kind of get this sense as you're saying this, it feels like it feels like you have very strong appreciation of time, both with your children, having that awareness that they're getting older every second and those moments are precious. And then also in your own training, having that awareness of like, this is a gift and a privilege rather than like, oh, I got to go do the thing today.
Yes. Yeah. If I can't do the thing, I can't do the thing. And I don't want it to ever feel like, oh, I have to do this.
Mm.
I think that would take the joy out of it for me. And I enjoy it so much, I don't want to ruin it. I treat it like a special thing. Something I really noticed at that Africa race is the people who were out there on course, they always said, oh, it's a privilege. They said what you just said. I don't hear that as much in the States, but spectators were just perpetually saying that. They're like, oh, it's such a privilege. And it really is. And usually when I'm running, there's a stretch, maybe not the whole time, but a lot of the time, where I'm just like filled with gratitude for the ability to be out there doing it, for the people I've met, for the beautiful day or what have you. I mean, I just like kind of like a roll through all the things I'm currently grateful for in my head. And that can take a really long time. I remember being out in Oregon, and there was like a 10-mile stretch between aid stations, and that's all I did from the time I left the one aid station to the next one. I was like thanking God for the beautiful trees, and I was like, look at these amazing, like I can't believe I'm out here. And so it's just a lot of joy most of the time. Sometimes things hurt a lot and it can detract. Or say, in Florida it's raining on you the entire time.
And then it's thank you for the coolness.
Yes, sometimes. And
yeah.
then bring the sun back out, please.
I know I really feel that I have so much of that happens in my training. I say it's my best time for prayer. It's my best time for gratitude because I'm in the right state for it. So as a mom, what lessons does ultra running strengthen in you that you observe yourself teaching to your children?
Oh, that's a good question. I think perseverance, and that failure is not something that, should be necessarily deemed as bad. You can fail over and over again and just learn from it and do better next time or change course or whatever, I think as a kid, failure felt like such a big thing. Like I never wanted to fail. I never wanted to get a bad grade. It was just like so stressful. And so I think with my kids, not that they're getting bad grades or anything of that nature, but like, if my son strikes out or, when he's playing baseball or throws a bad pitch, I'm like, don't dwell on it, just move to the next thing. Failures are going to happen. So I think failure and then perseverance. I mean, that's what ultra running is all about. It's, having the grit to keep going when things are really, really bad and knowing that you're going to be able to get through them. So I feel like that's something that is an ongoing lesson every day, every month, every year.
And probably the most important one, the belief that it's all going to work out. If it hasn't worked out yet, that story just isn't over yet, right?
Yes.
Um, okay, so just a kind of a technical logistical question. Ultra running is a fairly new sport, and the science of ultra runners, we've even only had like ultra coaches. I mean, this is something that's only happened in the last couple of decades, right?
Yeah.
And the science of the ultra runners is very novel. And then the science of the female ultra runner is even more novel. So what are some things that you observe that are, are just things that you have to plan ahead for or be aware of in your body as a female ultra runner?
Oh man. Well, obviously hormones are all over the place sometimes. Sometimes I wake up feeling like my legs weigh 20 pounds each or more than 20. They probably do weigh 20 pounds each, probably weigh 50 pounds each. Who knows? But like 4 times as much as they should weigh is what I'm getting at. So I just feel like I'm being like dragged to the ground. I swear it's hormonal. But I don't know that I really can pay that much mind because that's not something that I can control or change in my day-to-day life. But as an older female ultra runner who's had 3 babies, I have a lot of hip issues. So I take care of them. I go see a physical therapist always before a race and always after a race. I have her dry needle me. I would come see you for acupuncture if I could. I don't have somebody where I live. I live in rural central Illinois and I don't have the first idea where I could even find that. But so your surrounding region is lucky to have you. But dry needling is the closest thing I can get to that. So I have a physical therapist who's certified in dry needling, and I have that done before and after every race. And it makes a world of difference. My friends are like, why don't you just get a massage? And I'm like, because it's not the same. Like, I would love that. It feels great. But it doesn't, get deep down. And I think as an older ultra runner whose muscles maybe aren't as elastic as they were 20 years ago, that's really important. I also see a chiropractor fairly regularly. And I don't know if this is gender specific, but I think it helps with the hip problems that I've had since I had a baby, which is gender specific, I suppose. Hormones, though, I just have to suck it up and carry on. I guess that's how I treat that.
Do you find appetite changing throughout the month or hydration levels or need for water changing throughout the month? Do you does your nutrition preparation change? Do you how do you, I'll come back, I'll come to that one in just a second. Don't ask you too many questions at once.
Um, oh, well, yes, yes. I feel like my hormones make me crave things, especially right before that time of the month. I'm always like, give me all the carbohydrates in my refrigerator right now. But I really, I'm not one who my weight yo-yos, it always has. So if I don't pay attention to what I'm eating, then I will gain weight. And while a pound or two doesn't sound awful, it is awful if you're carrying it on a race for 100 miles. So,
Like 100
so
pounds.
yes, yeah. So I pay attention to what I eat. Eating clean, I think, is really important because I feel better physically when I eat things that are good for me. I like very simple foods. I have a very honorary stomach, so and I don't think hormones help that either because it's worse. It's worse at certain times of the month. So I just try to eat really clean and try to eat a lot of vegetables, and it makes me feel better.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because apparently GI issues are the #1 reasons that women DNF on ultras.
GI issues are the worst. I have spent many, many, many hours in races throwing up and running at the same time, which you can do. So don't let it stop you. Usually the stomach turns at some point for one reason or another. When I was running cold water just this past January, like I felt fine. I felt my stomach felt the best it's ever felt. And then I hit like mile, I think 50 something. It was 100K. So I was fairly close to being done, but it was 50 something. And I just, nothing wanted to stay in my stomach. It all wanted out. And you gotta do that. But when it comes to GI issues, that's definitely, I've learned so many lessons in that department because when you're running an ultra, you have to eat. If you don't eat, you're gonna bonk. You're gonna not have the stamina to go for that many miles. And so your stomach will be telling you don't eat, but you have to do it anyway. So that's a really tough one. And it's funny because food cravings during ultras change. I used to love Swedish fish. That was my go-to. I just slammed the Swedish fish. And then that's evolved over time. I kind of love paydays right now. But my key is also solid food. I see a lot of gels and I don't like gels for me. Not saying that that's right for everybody, but I think solid food, preferably healthy foods. I know a really amazing ultra runner who is vegetarian, or he might even be vegan. So he's out there eating carrots and celery on the which is what works for him. So it's different for everybody. So it's impossible to say, what you can do for your stomach when you're out there. But what I remind myself over and over again is this too shall pass. Because whatever it is, whether it's throwing up or having to go number 2 over and over and over again, like I did at my last race without any foliage, which was not awesome, that it just happens. So, but it passed and I finished. So I could see how GI would be a very big DNF factor for a lot of people.
What was your toughest race experience?
Well, Africa. Africa was by far Mogollon Monster, which was an Aravaipa race out west. That was my first attempt at a 200 that I DNF'd around mile 50. Was extremely challenging with, like I think it's 6 times up and down the Mogollon Rim, a ton of altitude. Excuse me, a lot of climbing. So that was very, very hard. But Africa had all of that minus the altitude, but it had a lot more climbing, I think. I don't know. It was so hard, but those two were both very challenging for a lot of the same reasons. But I never thought I was going to die. I don't think at Mogollon, where in Africa, I was pretty scared that I was going to fall off something and be either very seriously injured or, dead. So that was something I was not prepared for. Normally I'm not fearful during a race. Normally I'm just really happy. So that was a different emotion to mentally struggle with, which was new. So that was something to overcome that I'm proud I overcame, but it also took me a really long time. That was the longest I've ever run. It was, I would say, harder than the childbirth of 2 out of my 3 babies. And that's saying a lot. Ever had a baby. So well, not everybody, I suppose, but for me it was definitely hard. It took me 44 hours. And just as a point of reference, my fastest 100-mile run is 22 hours. So almost twice as long as I would like to be running. And it was a very challenging terrain.
And were you expecting that? Did you know in advance, okay, this is going to take me twice as long. I'm going to have everything prepared and wired for that?
Yep. So the race was 45-hour cutoff. So I was getting close, and I've never been so far like down the line. Like normally I'm very middle of the pack or even front of the pack at a smaller race. So I'm not used to being so close to cutoff and essentially what we call chasing cutoffs, because if you get too close to cutoff, then you're constantly trying to get ahead of it. And it's a very stressful experience. But I learned from my very first race that while you might have a goal of say 35 hours or 25 hours or whatever, but you need to have it in your head that it could take the whole time. Because my first race, Mogollon, had a 38-hour cutoff. And in my mind, I was going to be done by 30. And when I got to 50 and I was at like 24 hours, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm never going to make it. So I was very defeating. So in Africa, in my mind, I said, well, you could be out there for 45 hours, but let's try not to do that. Unfortunately, that's how it went, but I was mentally prepared for it to take that long.
Okay, so last question is, what calls you to this? Why do you do this, Liz? Oh my God, it's insane. And you're training for a 200-mile race, right?
I am. So, well, I'm glad you mentioned the 200 and this question at the same time, because there's a couple different reasons I do it. I do it because I love to run. I really do. And I think, I'll run a marathon on the weekend just for fun. So that's no longer a challenge. I really like to challenge myself. I like to not know that I can do it. So I feel pretty confident I can complete a 50, but hundreds are always kind of like, I think I can do it. I don't know if I can do it by cutoff though, or I don't know, like hundreds are always pretty variable because a lot of things can happen during that amount of time that are unexpected. So I like that challenge. I love the community of ultra runners and the amazing people like yourself and just other runners out on the trail that I get to meet and stay in touch with. Like I have all these friends all over the country that I met at these different things, and we stay on touch through Strava platforms, through Facebook, just through texting, and the adventurous nature of it. And like I saw a guy, I was volunteering at the aid station at Pot guy who I've seen several times over at different races, was like, "It's so great to see your face. I'm going to go do this thing in Idaho with a bunch of other runners. If you want to come," and it's like, "Yes, of course I want to come." And that kind of community really draws me in. And then my very, very best friend, her name is Brandy. She broke her ankle at one of the hardest races in all of the United States in January. It's called Hurt. It's in Hawaii. It's incredibly hard, and she broke her ankle, so she's not been able to race with me. Otherwise, you would have met her at Florida. And she is another reason I do this. I do this for time with her, just like I do with time with other runners. Because in this life where we have professional jobs, children, other hobbies or friends, and we have so many priorities pulling us in different directions. Time with the people you love most, out on a trail where you're just happy to be there is what calls me more than anything else. And it's funny you mentioned the 200, because the Bigfoot 200, Brandy and I both got into, and we were going to run it together. It was supposed to be this August, and we both deferred. And she
Are
deferred
you going to
first.
wait and do it with her?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah. Part of me thought, well, I'm physically able to go, I should do it. And then, well, as you know, I had some PTO I had to take for my mom, and she broke her ankle, and Brandy broke her ankle, and all these things. And I thought, there's no time limit on this. Like, sure, I'm not getting any younger, but when I was at Florida, I kept thinking, half the reason I'm there is for time with Brandy, and she's not there. And I don't think I want to run 200 miles without my best friend. So
oh,
I love her
so
so
sweet.
much, and I love and value our time together. So that's the other reason.
Oh, I'll bet that makes her feel really good too.
I think so. I hope so.
Well, Liz, is there anything else that you want to share? The people that are going to be watching this might not ever even have heard of an ultramarathoner before, or they might be, like very active. They might be ultramarathoners themselves. So is there any advice or thoughts or wisdom that you want to pass along?
Um, yeah, I guess when I started, I just love running, but over the years, I've just learned that the community is something that I don't think I ever want to live without. So if it's something that's like just kind of sparking your interest, just because of a love for running, I would recommend just trying a little one like I did. See how you like it. Don't be afraid to put your toe in the water, because the trail running community is welcoming. We love everybody from any walk of life, any shape, any size. You see it all out there. I mean, like I said, I'm a very average looking human. I know you can't see all of me here, but it's just something that you should do for yourself. Find your why, and embrace the joy that is running in the ultra running community, I guess.
Absolutely. And that is absolutely one of the things that I felt at that race that we were at. While I was hanging around after my race, there was a gentleman that rolled up finishing his 100-mile, and his little 3-year-old daughter trucked around right before he was about to cross the finish line, and he took her hand and they crossed that finish line together.
I would cry.
Yes, I totally did.
Well, so what's next for you then? What are you going to run?
So I'm not sure what's next, but I have signed up for the race in November by that same company, Runbum, up in Florida, and that'll be my longest race. And then I'm also planning on doing a half Ironman in December. So my training challenge is keeping it all together, but I actually think it's a little bit easier on my body to train the multiple disciplines because I can use the strengthening from swimming to strengthen my running muscles because I'm a newer runner and I have a long way to go.
Oh, I just one foot in front of the other. Just one foot in front of the other. Just keep going.
And this
Just
is
keep
why we love Liz.
it's like the from Finding Nemo. Just keep swimming. Just keep going.
And I have to say that was my other, as much as it was so just like, I just felt this joy spark when I met you. When I ran into you, you were running back in as I was running out on that trail. You were just as happy. Like, I'm like, oh, holy schmoly, we have water up to our thighs for a good portion of this. And if you have never run in water that high before, it's kind of like running blindfolded because you can't see the depth of where you're running. You don't know if there's tree branches or roots or anything there. And so like, that's why I was saying I found all of these stabilizer muscles that I didn't know I had. I have done plenty of running through water before, but not for such an extensive period of time. Liz just comes trucking in. She's just, got a big smile on her face and no complaint of what must have, and she's been running overnight and, for like 24 hours by this point. And I don't know if that's the exact right time or not, but yeah, like you're just happy. It was
Well,
amazing.
I'm happy to see you. That race was surprisingly challenging because of what you're talking about. I was not anticipating that for that one. I expected that race to be quite a bit faster.
Yeah.
But it was because I got to meet you, and I actually ran with this lovely woman named Julia, like I don't know, for like 50 to 70 miles, and we didn't know each other.
Awesome.
Now we do. We saw each other at Death Face just last weekend, the weekend before.
Well, Liz, it is such a joy to spend time with you today. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for it. And I hope you have a really fantastic day spreading the joy and enjoying love and life and all the grand stuff. And much love to your mom too.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. This was super fun.
My pleasure. Okay. So, bye.